provisions of the Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth, an act relative to the protection of the wetlands is most recently amended. Notice of time and place of this hearing was published in the Neighborhood News, Fairhaven Neighborhood News, on September 5th, 2024. It was also posted in the town clerk's office. Persons wishing to be heard will be called in the following order. I'll just ask that anybody that has their cell phones with them, please make sure they're on silent. And also remind you that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. All right, your first order of business, no minutes, any meeting mail, no meeting mail. Stormwater. Continued public hearing, stormwater, AMN Estate Holdings LLC, 39 Keene Road. A stormwater permit application has been filed by AMN Estate Holdings for property located at 39 Keene Road, map 2, lot 16, 12G, 13B. The applicant proposes to construct a 6-lot residential subdivision including 702 linear feet of roadway with a cul-de-sac turnaround, on-site sewage disposal systems, and private wells. The applicant is represented by John Marchian of Fallon Corp. Plan name is Drainage Map, Angelo Drive Subdivision, dated August 30th, 2023, revised March 25th, 2024. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Marchian, yes.
Hi, good evening, John Marchian from Fallon Corp. I just quickly wanted to give the commission an update on where we are. Earlier today, I submitted the revised report, revised plans for the subdivision. I feel like we've addressed GAF's comments. Obviously, the commission hasn't had a chance to look at them. GAF hasn't had a chance to review them, so I just figured I'd give the board an update, and I guess we'd be seeking a continuance until probably early October.
Yeah, so our next meeting is what, 26th?
25th, I believe.
25th, and then the meeting after, and then you filed an RDA as well. I got the email, I looked through it, I didn't look at anything, I just saw that there was an RDA attached to it. So the filing, that'll be for the next filing deadline?
October 9th.
October 9th? Okay, so October 9th. We'll do both. We'll do the peer review responses and the RDA for October 9th.
Perfect.
All right, so is there a motion to continue this public hearing until October 9th?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to new business. Public hearing, notice of intent, Lake Street, New Bedford Reservoir, Lakes 1, 2, and 4. Map 3, Lot 13, Map 4, Lot 49, Map 19, Lot 32. SE file number 0010595. A notice of intent was filed by James Kelly, Town Administrator of Acushnet, for the property located at the New Bedford Reservoir, Lakes 1, 2, and 4. The applicant proposes the removal at the root of invasive weeds from areas of the New Bedford Reservoir, Lakes 1, 2, and 4, located in Acushnet using an eco-harvester. The applicant is represented by Scott Daggett, Lake Street Improvement Committee. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Daggett, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Scott Daggett. I'm a member of the Lake Street Improvement Committee here in town, along with Mr. Gary Coppa and Mr. James Gamache. First of all, we're citizens of the town. We have an interest in trying to get these ponds cleaned up. A lot of improvements have been made, but one improvement that we really want to get started is the removal of the invasive weed species that are in the pond. So part of the problems with these ponds is they've been mismanaged for decades. They're owned by the city of New Bedford. To my knowledge, doing some research, it's my belief that nothing has been done to manage the expansive invasive weed growth that we are experiencing in these ponds. And it's not just Lake Street, it's statewide. There are numerous places, rivers, streams, lakes, ponds that are being impacted by these weeds. But Lake Street is our problem, and we propose to take action to manage it and create a maintenance plan that will, over a period of different phases, will hopefully cut down and manage the weed growth, keep it at manageable levels. So part of the problem is these weeds tend to grow really fast through phosphorus and nitrates. They tend to feed the weeds. And the reason why these invasive weeds are such a problem is because they start overtaking the natural native weeds that are in this ecosystem. After a period of time, they just tend to overgrow everything, kill off all the existing weeds, and sooner or later you end up with a pond that would look like Tom Davis Pond. It would be a pond that would be converted from a body of water to a wetland or a marsh or something to that effect. The reason why invasive weeds are bad is because they hamper the growth of the natural weeds that are beneath it. They block out sunlight. They can create some fish kills when they get to a point where the level of weed growth is so expansive that it just tends to choke out any oxygen levels that are in the water. So it's an unsightly mess. It looks terrible. I'm sure many of you have driven up and down Lake Street, and especially this time of year, August. It's really, really bad. And those of us in the Lake Street Improvement Committee are looking to get something done. This particular project, early on last year, we were thinking of using herbicides. We decided against that. We had received some response from local cranberry growers, and much to their concerns, we listened, realized that the use of herbicides would probably be a bad thing. It could potentially impact residential wells of all the abutters in the area, and also affect their cranberry crop. So if they had any levels of any of the herbicides that would be detected during their harvest, it's my understanding that the ocean spray would reject their crop, and these people would be out of money. So we don't want to affect their crop. We don't want to affect any neighboring wells. We don't want to bring any additional liability to the town, so we shelved the herbicide use, which we were going to go through Solitude Lake Management. So currently what we want to do is we want to use an eco-harvester. C&D Underwater out of Newtown, Connecticut. I had spoken to Jeff Corsto. He's one of the owners of the company. Back in August of last year, he and I did a walkthrough. He was shocked at how badly impacted the ponds were. And he had suggested that an eco-harvester would be a better alternative to herbicide use. Eco-harvesters have their pros and cons. It's less of an environmental impact as opposed to herbicides, which could, like I had mentioned before, create much more ecological problems. And it could also help spread out some of the weeds somewhat, because as the eco-harvester is pulling the weeds from the root, you may get some of the weeds that are broken up and spread out a little bit, and then the weeds will regrow over time. But in the long run, we think that using an eco-harvester is probably going to be much more beneficial to manage these ponds effectively. So Jeff had looked at the ponds, suggested that the eco-harvester would probably be the best option. The way that would work is an eco-harvester is sort of like a small little barge or a little paddle boat. Got a series of 2 wheels in the front, and what it does, it takes weeds that are suspended to the top of the water. These 2 wheels kind of rotate against each other, and they pull the weeds onto a conveyor belt into a hopper. And once he's got enough in the hopper, he would then dispose of the weeds on the shoreline, preferably at the boat ramp or someplace where we could be able to truck it off-site after it's been dewatered. And then once it's dewatered, I believe Dan Menard said that we would have permission to be able to store these at the town yard where people could use them for compost. They're rich in nutrients, so they make excellent compost. I believe the town of Lakeville and Freetown, I believe that's what they're doing so C&D has been working at Long Pond for the last 2 years, I believe. And it's my understanding that they take those weeds and that's exactly what they do with them. They use them for compost. Anybody that wants it, they can haul it away. So before you have a copy of the notice of intent. This project is considered an ecological restoration project because we're trying to improve the conditions of the pond. Hopefully, by managing these ponds, we will make it much easier for people to enjoy the ponds, make the ecosystem more of a healthier ecosystem, and hopefully people in town will be able to enjoy the ponds. I know myself, I fish it a lot, and it becomes more difficult to fish when the weeds are closer to the street. People are out there fishing with bait, and the bait just sits on top of the water, and people can't enjoy it. Eventually what will happen is these weeds will grow so much that people like the cranberry growers will probably have a little bit more difficulty trying to pump water from the ponds because of the weed growth that may impede their pumps. Another thing that will happen eventually is you'll get biomass. What biomass is, for those of you who don't know, is these weeds grow and die in a cycle. In the summertime, in August, they're at their greatest growth. Then around springtime, around the fall to early winter, they start to die off, and when they die off, they fall to the bottom. So year after year, as they die, they just stack on top of each other, almost forming, if you will think of it in terms of dirt. And eventually, they will get to be so high that they will actually come and stop at the surface of the water. The small pond across the street from Tom Davis, there's a couple areas of biomass there. You might see geese or ducks at any time sitting on top of it. It looks like they're sitting on top of the water, but they're not. They're actually sitting on top of this island of biomass. That is something that we hope to reduce and prevent. Right now, the two larger ponds are not necessarily at a point where biomass is a big problem, but the smaller pond across the street from Tom Davis Pond, that pond is in really bad shape. There's at least 2, maybe 3 areas of biomass in that pond. I would say about 80 to 85% of that pond is impacted with milfoil and fanwort, which are 2 of the more invasive species of weeds that are out there. The 2 larger ponds, they're more affected by fanwort, bladderwort, and milfoil. But because of their size and their depth, they're not nearly as impacted as the smaller pond is. Depth plays a little bit of a role into it because the deeper water that you have, these weeds need sunlight to grow like any other weed, like any other vegetative plant. If the water's deep enough, the sunlight can't get to them, so they don't grow nearly as much in deep water. Typically, depths of 4 feet, 5 feet or less, you will see these areas of milfoil and fanwort. So what I have here is I have a blow-up of the maps that you currently have, identifying the ponds by number. And the other sheet, which was created by Solitude a year or so ago, shows the areas that are actually impacted by vegetative growth in the pond. In the legend are the scientific names of the plants or the vegetative growth that's in the ponds. I created a little spreadsheet for you so that you would be able to know the common name of those particular plants. So you can see in the diagram that the south pond is impacted, but not nearly as impacted as the north pond, and certainly not nearly as impacted as the small pond, which is pond number...
2?
Pond number 2, I believe.
Yep.
So what we propose to do is hopefully next year in August, and you probably ask yourselves, why August? Why do I mention August a lot? That is when these invasive weeds are at their greatest growth. So think of it in terms of a haircut. When your hair gets long, you get a haircut. Well, when these weeds are at their greatest growth, we want to take them and remove them. It makes it easier for the eco-harvester to be able to grab them, and it makes more of an impact removing the weeds. So like I had mentioned before, you can see the impacts on the color-coded chart compared to the actual size of the ponds. So we're hopeful that we can get Jeff next year from C&D in August to come out here, and we would like to have him. It'd be ideal if we could have him out here for 2 weeks, because he's currently, in August they tend to work over at Long Pond, so it's beneficial for him to hit it in August after he's done his work at Long Pond, just to come over to Lake Street and do what he's got to do there. It'd be nice to get him for 2 weeks, like I said. That way we can concentrate. Phase 1, what we would like to do is areas along the street, along Lake Street. Reason for that is townspeople that are driving up and down the street, they'll see the eco-harvester out there, they'll know that the money that they voted in at town meeting is actually being used for what we intended for. That action is finally being taken to remediate the weeds from these ponds. So I'm hoping that we can get Jeff out there, do both sides of the street. Maybe if he's got time, we can do an area of the small pond before that gets to be too much of a problem. Typically, he can do about an acre a day. The last time, which was last year, I had gotten a quote from him that it would probably cost around $5,500 a day for one operator and one machine. So that amounts to about 1 acre a day. For 5 days, we're hoping maybe he can knock out 5 acres, 6 acres maybe on each pond, which would be great. And that's pretty much what we propose to do.
Excellent. Any questions, comments, concerns from the board? Anybody from the public? Questions, comments, concerns?
How much did you say it was gonna cost?
So based on last year's estimate, it's about $5,500 a day for one operator running one machine. I believe the removal of any of the weeds, we could probably do it with our DPW crews. I don't know if Jeff factored in any of that in his estimates, which is something that I can discuss with Jeff later down the road.
Is that covered by Acushnet on the Bedford?
Well, that's going to be covered by the town of Acushnet. New Bedford has pretty much just given us their blessing to do what we feel we need to do to manage the ponds and take care of the ponds. We have a 25-year, I believe it's called a mutual order of understanding, in which the city gives us permission to manage the ponds and do what we need to do, but we need to keep them in the loop. So whenever we get ready, Once this notice of intent has been approved, once the state has given us our blessing and the Conservation Commission has given us our, our blessing, we'll communicate with the city of New Bedford, keep them above board so that they can't say that they don't know what's going on. And we'll just go from there.
Thank you, Scott.
Sorry, no, I just have a couple questions.
If you guys gotta come up, just come up to the podium and state your name so we have it for the record. You're on camera right now. Just
Really
state
very
name.
simple question.
Just for the minutes, we need your name for the record.
Great, Brenda P.L. Log. 2 questions. One was, you said that it would grab the plants at the top of the surface. How deep will it go down to grab the one stem below the water? Because I call it queen tail, I don't
Yeah,
know what
so-
it is, but will it grab that stuff way down too?
So what it necessarily does is it goes to a depth of about 18 inches to about 2 feet. And as these wheels are rotating, it grabs whatever weeds are in that
2 feet.
2-foot depth, and it pulls them, almost like the old-fashioned
Yeah, I get what
ringers
you're
on-
saying, where it pulls them up out. I was just wondering how far down it would
Yeah,
grab them.
yeah.
Oh, 2 feet.
Yeah, about 2 feet, but it'll pull it at the root.
Okay.
So, at least scientifically, that's how it's supposed to
All
work.
right, second question. You say you can do like, what, 5 acres a day?
Well,
And
no,
you're only
so-
gonna do it for 2 weeks?
So I believe they can do.
Yeah, 1 acre, sorry.
I believe they can do about 1 acre a day. That's what was initially told to me by Jeff.
Yep.
I can get more clarification on that later on down the road. But typically, we're hoping that if we can get him for a 5-day stretch on both of the large ponds, and maybe 1 or 2 days on the little pond, it's going to be a series of phases. There's
Right,
no
so
way that we're going to be able to tackle
Very big of.
the larger
Part of the
ponds.
ponds, yeah. So you're
That would have
gonna
been the
do-
benefit, that would have been the benefit of using herbicides. That was the one plus,
Yeah.
because with herbicides, you got a guy, you got a crew out there on a boat,
Right.
and they spread the herbicides, and they hit the entire pond within a day.
Right, gotcha, with the cranberry guy, so.
Yes, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
so-
no, I was
so-
just curious how much you were gonna be able to do in like a year. So this is gonna be like a 10-year?
Oh, it's gonna be a
Forever
multi-year,
thing?
it's gonna be a multi-year project. I have to discuss with Jeff, to find out from him how often we will be going over from start to finish.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how much of the ponds that we can actually hit within a certain amount of time, and then figure out what that amount of time is where we have to go back and revisit what
The
we
exact same
initially
place you already
started.
did.
Because it's gonna require continual maintenance. This is not a one and done where the weeds are gonna get pulled and you can just wash your hands of it and leave it alone.
Okay,
It will regrow.
my taxes are going up, no.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Scott, I think we should also include in this some kind of a budget, what the money is, where the money's gonna come from. I really think that's important that we cover this as well for this project, and let it be known to the public how we're gonna hopefully go about this, and how we're gonna try to obtain this money if this project was to move forward.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to touch on that.
Yeah. So what we hope to do, right now, I believe the annual town meeting that we had back in 2020 and last year's annual town meeting, we were approved for $75,000 out of the,
CPC.
CBC money.
yes. So we have money in place. Well, I know some of that money has been spent on other items other than the invasive weeds. Some of that money's been used for the improvements, the boat ramp, the lighting, the parking areas, the sidewalks, the guardrails. So there's other improvements that money has been used for other than the remediation of the weeds. I have been doing a little bit of research. I'm going to get in touch with Bill Napolitano from Serpide, find out exactly how they're getting funding for Long Pond, see if we can, get into trying to get some of that same funding that they have used. There's also some other funding available. I believe it's through DCR. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe that there are programs out there in which we can get some funding and grants. But right now, whatever is left over in that budget is what we initially plan on using for phase one. Then we'll revisit, after phase one, we'll revisit, we'll see how the results are, whether, they're acceptable or not, and we'll go from there. But we will be looking into, getting grants, because even though Lake Street is a beautiful natural resource, and it's one of the only beautiful natural resources in town other than the mill pond over at the sawmill, we hope that we can somehow get some funding from other sources and not expect taxpayers in town to fund this.
Right, that's my concern, is to pass this burden on to the taxpayers of the town of Acushnet.
I mean, in a perfect world, I would like to see the city of New Bedford help out.
We all would up here. And
Yeah, I mean, they own it.
I think we need to keep poking that bear.
Yeah.
I personally have some fears about this project on the money aspect of this, and passing that burden on to the taxpayers, including myself,
Yeah.
of this town. This is a long-term project that's gonna cost a lot of money.
It has the potential.
It does have potential, I'm not stating it
I mean,
doesn't.
it's a benefit to the town to take care of this. Because if we don't, it's gonna end up, I wouldn't say an ecological disaster, but it's gonna impact the environment and be detrimental, I think, to everybody that lives in that area.
Right. I just feel that we need to exhaust every avenue possible to go outside and get the funding for this project. As I've stated, instead of passing this on to the taxpayers of this community. I know that there is criteria for DCR. I don't think Lake Street will be covered under the DCR layout with what they have to meet their criteria. I would like to see an action plan to exhaust all these avenues to be able to secure this funding before we sell this to the public, so to speak.
I would just say, I sorry to interrupt. I mean, from a conservation standpoint, we can't deny the plan because the funding, that's not our jurisdiction. I just want to clarify that. Like, I wouldn't deny the project because they don't have the funding for it. I mean, if they give us the plan and all that other stuff, the funding would have to go through town meeting and all that other stuff. And that's where we can get on a pedestal and say, I don't want to be a taxpayer. I don't want that coming out of, the taxpayer.
Mr. Chairman, may
Yeah.
I? Scott, the other thing that I was just thinking about, so when you're saying we're gonna put this on land, right? You guys have a plan to, like, how to dry it out? You just can't put it up and let all the water run right back into the pond. So is that plan being looked at? Like, are you guys gonna have to put hay bales and silk fence and wattles?
That I am not 100% certain, because I'm not sure how the Conservation Commission's gonna wanna treat that. It's.
Well, it's a slope there.
Well,
So if you got the
you're
water
removing-
running down, you're gonna be letting the sand go back in there and,
I mean, yeah, that, you might be looking a little bit,
1 second, sorry.
you might be looking at it in, under a microscope just a little bit too much. I don't think you're gonna create a lot of runoff from this stuff dewatering.
Not in the silt, I don't see.
the only thing I'm saying is it's something that when you guys are putting this together and come to us, it should be, hey, we don't need it, or yes, we're gonna need it, and that's something that's C and D.
It's not a dredging operation, it's gonna be in the,
The only thing is, I mean, when you pull a weed in your garden, when you pull a weed, does dirt come up?
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. So when they pull this up, it's not gonna be a dry-rooted plant. You might end up with some dirt and everything else.
That's another thing too. I was curious about the turbidity,
Yeah.
the bottom getting stirred up.
So that's what I'm saying, it's just something we might have to look into, something you can discuss with C&D with.
Right.
And all I'm saying is when you bring it to us, if you already know that, then it's not something that we're asking and you don't have the answer. I think it's something that should be
Well-
part of the package with C&D.
Right, well, like Ryan had mentioned, turbidity, you're gonna get some turbidity.
Right.
You're not disturbing the bottom like you would be dredging.
No.
Like he mentioned, you're pulling a weed.
Right.
You pull a weed, you're pulling it by the root, you're gonna get a little bit of disturbance, especially when you're doing the lily pads. So we plan on cutting back the lily pads a little bit because, like in this diagram here, this is the south end of lake number 1. And you can see, the growth of the lily pads. You can see the lily pad. That's not the lake, but you can see the lily pad growth here. The lily pads tend to follow the other weeds. If you notice the small pond, back 3 years ago, you didn't have nearly as many lily pads as there was. The lily pads tend to follow the other emergent weeds that are there, so they tend to grow out. What we also want to do is not only control the invasive weeds, but we also want to control the lily pads a little bit. We want to we want to be able to cut them back a little bit as well, and to do that, from the way that Jeff explained it to me, is the hydro the eco harvester will grab it by the root, but the root of the lily pad is almost like a bulb. So what happens is it may not necessarily pull the lily pad out at that time, but it creates enough of a disturbance where it actually pulls the root, and then within a couple of days or so, it will de-root itself, if you will, and actually float to the bottom. And then Jeff will come in within the next few days and actually skim the top of the water to be able to remove any of those lily pads
That's floating.
that have been, disturbed. So like in this image here, you can see the impact of the lily pads, and almost guaranteed, this is along Lake Street here. This would be the south pond. This would be the north pond. And all along here is where that Eurasian, or the variable milfoil is, which is the really large culprit. I don't know if you've seen photographs of them. I wish I had brought some diagrams, but we commonly call it cooney tail because it looks like a raccoon's tail, and it just gets really thick, and it tends to follow along, or I should say the lily pads tend to follow along pretty much the edge of the weeds. Some of the cooney tail or milfoil will actually venture out, but typically it follows that area. And then I have a few more photographs here. This is the north end of Lake 1, so this is the north end of the largest lake. You can now, back around maybe 10, 15 years ago, this used to be all open water here. Now it's nothing but lily pads, and underneath the lily pads is nothing but milfoil. This area gets choked out. Kayakers have a hard time getting in there. People with trolling motors with their john boats have a hard time getting in there. I think you had mentioned at one time the large roots. You mentioned that on Saturday, the large roots that are probably a good 3 inches
3 or 4,
across,
yeah.
and they got scales that look like your thumbnail. That's up in this area here. That's something that we want to be able to manage. We want to take care of it. We want to be able to cut this back and remove all the bad weeds, and try to at least do our best to get it in a natural state.
Sir, you got a question? Yep, come on up to the podium.
Well, really, as far as piling the trash up is concerned, if you have a large plastic top and the edge of it is in the water, the only thing that's gonna go back in the water is what came out of the water. And it could be laid there for I don't know how long before it starts to smell, but
Right.
like that. We do that basically when we're harvesting cranberries with a trash trailer. You put a top underneath so that the water coming out of the trash trailer through the screens doesn't wash out or erode the edges of the box, that kind of thing.
Good
Makes
idea.
sense.
Yeah.
So, not to bore you with more photographs, but this is the south end of Lake 2. This is looking south. This is Lake Street here. This would be Tom Davis Pond. This is the south pond where the dam is. The school's over here. And this is the small pond that's across the street from Tom Davis Pond. If you've been out there recently, you've driven by it. These photographs were taken, I think, about 3, maybe 4 years ago. So if you drive out there and you look, this is much worse now. It's more densely covered with lily pads, and the milfoil that's in there is just out of control. Jeff felt that this pond is irredeemable. He feels that it can't be managed. I think he was mistaken with Tom Davis, because he's a professional, but in my opinion, I think this pond can be saved. I don't think it's at a point where it's beyond redemption. And again, just a few more photographs. You can see this is the large pond. This is where White's would be, the campground. And you can see, you could probably just barely see the difference in the color here. Well, that's where the milfoil is. So just because you see the edge of the lily pads, the milfoil tends to creep out beyond that. And eventually what will happen is you'll get biomass in these areas and you're going to lose aquatic real estate, if you will. So another thing that we eventually have to consider down the road, once we've started managing these ponds, the other part of management is making sure this doesn't happen again. So we may have to look into how to control runoff, how to control, prevent, control phosphorus and nitrates from getting in here, because these plants feed on that stuff, and they tend to outperform when it comes to consuming nitrates and phosphorus compared to the other plants, native plants, and that's why their growth is so exponential.
Right, so you need to locate the source.
Yeah, whether it's, whether the source is failed septic systems or whether the source is fertilizers that are running off of people's lawns, or I don't even know.
Cows along the edge of water.
Right, or I don't know if any sources come from cranberry bogs. I do not know. I don't know much about the cranberry industry, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if that's even a possibility. But at some point, we may have to look into preventative measures to stop this from happening again.
Right.
So that would mean the introduction to some type of chemicals?
Not necessarily. We may just want to make people aware of the use of fertilizers. If they could reduce their fertilizer, talking about residences. If they could reduce maybe their fertilizer use, cut it in half. Not over fertilize their lawns. Just some basic, common, sensible practices. From what I know, there's only 2 cranberry growers, I believe, that are on the entire pond. From what I've read, it's a minor impact compared to all of the other impacts that could result from failed septic systems and runoff from subdivisions and things like that.
Mr. Braley, go ahead.
How about the boats that are coming into the pond from other places?
Yes.
How are you gonna keep them from bringing it back in?
So another thing that we would like to do is signage. Signage is only as effective as people are willing to follow it. You go to Long Pond, there's signage out there. Please remove your weeds. Something very similar to that. signage. Let people know that, weeds that are on your trailer after you've launched your boat, or on the back of your outboard, or on your trolling motor,
Clean your prop.
clean your prop, clean your trailer. I do it. I fished a little pond. You wouldn't believe the stuff that comes on my trailer. I just pull it off and put it on the shoreline, and that way it doesn't go from pond to pond. People wonder, you get these smaller landlocked ponds that don't have a boat ramp, and they're like, well, how does that stuff get in there? People's paddles, people's canoes, a little piece of it could be hanging on their kayak. You think it's dry, but it could float off and end up regrowing. So signage is one method of making people aware. Again, signage is only as effective as people willing to actually follow it. But at least it's there, and it'll remind people that to keep this resource in decent shape, people have to do their part.
Absolutely.
I got a question. Gary Rockcliffe, Mecaway. I live on a pond. The guy that's maintaining Long Pond right now, you said, how long is he going to be over there doing whatever he does in August?
So I believe they're in their second year.
Okay.
And I don't know the specifics. I know a typical notice of intent is good for 3 years, I believe.
Yes.
So he's going to be there at least another year. I would imagine he's probably going to be there longer, but
All right, so he hasn't gotten the whole pond done over there on
no. They've only done certain areas of the pond.
All right, so if we're gonna get him for 10 days, at $5,500 a day, that's 55 grand for the year.
Well,
If it takes us 10 years to clean all these ponds, because there's a considerable amount of acreage if you start adding up everything around the ponds, you're looking at probably pretty close to a 10-year plan. So it's talking about $500,000 to get all the weeds out of there. I'm all in favor of getting the weeds out of there and rejuvenating the ponds and letting everybody use them and everything. And as far as like $500,000, it might seem like a large number, but we've wasted more than that. Perry Hill Church, for a prime example, we spent just about that much refurbishing that, and we don't even use it. So if we're gonna use Lake Street, I think we should try it. And if after 3 years, it doesn't seem like it's making a difference, then take another action. But I think you ought to try to do something than to do nothing. Thank you.
I agree.
Very good.
Everett?
I have just one question. Have you seen the document that this commission got from Division of Marine Fisheries?
Yes, I have.
Dated August 27th, and
Yeah.
there are issues in there that I would think would be on the committee's responsibilities to do the water testing and stuff, and
Yeah.
not the commission itself.
Right. So that's something.
I didn't know if you were aware of this.
Yes, so I know about their toy restrictions, time of year restrictions, which wouldn't affect us because I believe their restrictions were,
April 1st to June 15th.
yes. So we plan on doing this stuff in August, when the weeds are at their greatest growth, so the toy restrictions really wouldn't apply to us.
Right.
In reference to
The survey.
actually doing surveys and seeing how effective this is, I can discuss that with Jeff, find out what he normally does, whether or not that's something that's within his scope of work. If not, I believe there's enough people between me and the other two gentlemen who are on the commission, or on the committee, that frequently fish those ponds. We could, with our own two eyes, we may be a little, impartial to what's going on, but, we may have a little bit of an interest there, but, we could see the results. I'm certain that with the first phase being along the road, anybody could actually walk up and down those roads and take a look and actually see a difference.
I spoke with the agent for a little bit last night, and he actually brought up a good point about maybe reaching out to UMass Dartmouth, having a student that's doing a project or a study. That could be an option. That's.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Looking at the notice of intent in this letter, I like the project. I have no issues with the project at all. I see that you're waiting on comment from Natural Heritage. MIPA and MISA.
Yeah, and I don't expect to be too much of a comment from Natural Heritage because there's a very small portion of the South Pond, which is within Natural Heritage, which is where the earthen dam is. If I remember correctly, I think it's some kind of a mussel that's in the river downstream.
Okay.
Since we're not doing anything of like herbicides, I don't believe any downstream impact would exist.
Yep.
But that's up to Natural Heritage to look into and decide. And
I didn't know if they'd come back with something on turtle sweeps or anything like that.
So if there were any issues with turtles, because I had discussions with Jeff about that, typically what they do, and I guess it's about as effective as it can be, but the person who's running the machine will observe the belt as it's pulling the weeds, and whatever turtles that they see, they will physically, gently put them back into their habitat. Jeff has told me that they've had a very good track record in managing that. I don't believe. I know some people have had reservations about potentially harming fish or fish kills. It's my understanding that this will not impact any fish in the ponds at all, because it just doesn't get deep enough where you're not disturbing the bottom, you're not dredging, you're not scraping the bottom, you're just pulling these weeds at the root.
Right, and I imagine they'd swim away if something was.
Yeah, typically, anybody who's a fisherman knows if you're making a lot of noise or you're boating, they'll tend to hide.
Right. I'm a hunter. I stomp through the woods. The deer run the opposite way. I get it.
Yeah.
So I guess really that was I know you wait until August. Before I guess my recommendation would be before we agree or disagree. Again, I'm in favor of this. I would like to see the comments come back from those agencies.
Yeah.
But we got the ball rolling here.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Mark, the floor's yours.
So, thanks. I mean, this is obviously a remarkable ecological resource here in the town. I think you kind of touched on this already, but I think the comments from Department of Marine Fisheries, I think they had a couple on, the specifics of a monitoring plan. And I think this is we're actually seeing a natural process. I mean, wetland succession into a bog, but we've accelerated it. So I think trying to get the weeds out, and as you said, the other piece is nitrogen and phosphorus. Whether it's good, and you also mentioned we're seeing it everywhere down on the Cape. Every place they're having problems with this, and it's can be road runoff. It's failed septic systems, and I think in terms of it is going to be a long-term project trying to understand how to, can we reduce those, those inputs of nutrients and arrest or reverse the, nutrient enrichment of these ponds. And I think there may be funding in some of that through, whether DEP or in terms of grants for the monitoring. Environmental Protection Agency is ultimately responsible for, while they want to tell you that they're not, they've delegated authority to the state. They're ultimately, and they'd probably be more than happy, well, I don't know if they'd be more than happy, but it's a potential source, to get at some of the monitoring. And the chairman and myself, we talked a little bit, and it's beyond the commission's, role, but, or maybe not, but if you want to find somebody cheaply, I hate to say this, as a former grad student, but you find a grad student or somebody that's looking for a research project, and again, it's not really essential for the project to happen, but just some ideas thrown out there. And I guess one other observation I had was and I couldn't find it, but I know there's the invasive species, the milfoil or the coontail and the others, but there was some, those are the invasives, and then there was some reference to nuisance species. And I understand the water lilies, they're encroaching on the open water, but, and maybe I made this up, but I thought there was something in the proposal that addressed cattails. And just, I think most, people know, or if they don't, that's a really important, wetland, native wetland plant for waterfowl, ducks, geese, well, ducks, with that one.
Right,
But,
and I think cattails is something that we are not planning on doing anything to.
It's a hard job, there.
Well,
You got a mix of stuff.
Right,
but-
and cattails are typically a shoreline type plant.
Right.
You don't typically see them in the middle of a pond.
Right.
If you see any, it may be anywhere from 5 to 6 feet out from the shoreline. We don't plan on touching any of the cattails. As far as we're concerned, we don't consider the cattails an invasive species.
Yeah.
Or I should say a critical invasive species that's going to really impact the pond.
I might have made that up.
Yeah,
In my
but-
mind, I think I read something.
No, I don't think you did. I just saw it, and it was under solitude. It said something about trimming the cattails back.
Okay,
but
maybe that was, but, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if, again, as a guide, I used what Solitude had put together last year. It's possible, maybe that particular phrase or that sentence, could be a typo. But we do not plan on doing anything to cattails.
And
The eco harvester, first of all, wouldn't be able to grab them because cattails are 5, 6 feet high in some areas. Again, the eco harvester is only skimming the surface and affecting anything from the surface 18 inches to about 24 inches below the surface, just grabbing the weeds. So there's an eco harvester I do not think would be effective at removing cattails. That's something that would probably be manually pulled, and we do not propose that.
and I think in terms of managing this, sorry, I kind of lost the thread there, but yeah, it's an important one, and it was just a side note. I kind of saw it somewhere, and I know you had a question, but I had a couple more, just thoughts.
Quick question, that's all. The regrowth rate, if they come in, they clean it out, how long before they're gonna come back and do it again? Is that every 5 years, 10
Well,
years?
that's something that I have to discuss with the people at C&D. They are much more knowledgeable with those aspects than I am. My trade is just civil engineering. And again, that is something that I need to discuss with Jeff to find out how often they're gonna have to come back and, what we do in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, maybe phase 4, and then
Back to phase 1.
back to phase 1. We have to
So it's a
figure out.
never-ending cycle, it's just.
Right, and there's, based on the photo, based on what you see here, and I don't know if you people have seen the images, but this color image is the vegetative growth that's in the lakes. You can see, and not all of these are invasives. Some of these are all mixed in within the color categories that you see here. But it may, it may take a process where, it might take 5 or 6 phases before we go back to what we did at phase 1 and hit those areas. But these ponds are so large, one of them being probably over 100 acres, the other one being, I believe it's maybe 65 acres. So it's going to take some time before we can be able to manage the entire pond and then go back to what we initially started. Again, to answer your question, I have to communicate with Jeff on that from C&D Underwater, get his thoughts as to when, how quickly these plants will regrow, and then we have to revisit the beginning all over again.
How much are those boats?
how much of eco harvester?
Might be a lot of people.
I don't know, I know at one point.
I saw 98,000 because I looked it up on.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question, and I believe last year, 18 months ago, I had a discussion with Selectman Gaspar, because he posed the same question you did. Wouldn't it be nice if the town could acquire their own eco harvester? Train somebody at DP, at the DPW, how to use it? Maybe make a little side money on it or something by, loaning it out to other municipalities.
Yeah.
Because we're not gonna be using it all the time. So, that may be something to look into where we can manage it ourselves instead of paying someone else to manage it for us. It would save tax dollars, and, it'd be something that I believe that DPW could probably manage on their own.
But my own personal opinion, I think I'd want that away from the DPW, keep it away from that fund and do something else. But I do agree that we should look into purchase. I mean, you gotta say, right, 75,000 is 13 days.
Yeah.
That's what you get out of 75 grand.
And probably,
It said 98,000.
Yeah.
Even if it was 150,
Right.
it doesn't matter, right? So there's 26 days that we're gonna pay for, and we know this is gonna be an ongoing thing forever.
right.
Right?
I think we need to determine the success of the
Right, so
the
this,
process first.
Sure.
Because the question being asked about how often and how fast, I think that's yet to be determined as well, because what's the level of nitrate and phosphorus and the sources that are feeding into the system that's promoting the growth? So, again, until you do a pre-survey with, aerial photography or whatever the process be, and look at it, year to year, then you'll have a better idea of what it's gonna take to manage the whole place. It's,
Right. Yeah, we're kind of putting the cart.
Right,
before the
so,
horse.
it's a big test, the first
Again.
time they go there.
And that's why I would like to do it along the street. I know some people have an interest of, hitting certain areas of ponds.
I think that makes total sense,
Yeah.
because that's gonna be the easiest areas to
Yeah.
map out and
And-
photograph and survey.
Right.
And look at year to year to year,
Yeah.
Is it been 3 years it's already, blooming in, is it 5 years, and so on.
And it's an easy
And-
survey site. for
Right,
people
well,
to drive by.
that's what I'm saying,
Right.
right?
And it's easy to get rid of the
So,
weeds, you're right there
I
next to the
mean,
boat
I think
ramp.
it just,
Yeah.
what you're referencing right now makes total sense.
Mr. Brayley, had your hand up?
How close to shore do they work, and how much water is required for the thing to work? I mean, can they work in 3 feet of water? I'm just wondering. Have you ever seen one work?
I've only seen one work on videos, YouTube videos.
There's a half an hour YouTube video on Long Pond, them doing Long Pond.
Right, right. So there's plenty of videos out there. If you Google C&D underwater, they have their own website. You can observe photographs and videos and actually see the process. I know watching a video is not the same thing as seeing it in person. We wanted to try to get a demonstration last year. As some of the conservation members know, but following certain guidelines, we weren't allowed to do that, which is understandable, because, there are some risks involved. It's a boat. You use gasoline to power the boat. We wanted to make sure that, certain restrictions were in place and that everything was going to be followed to certain specifications. To answer your question, I do not know 100% because I don't know if it's like a V-hull boat or if it's like a John boat with a flat bottom. I don't know how much water it actually displaces. But I would have to say a reasonable, off the top of my head, a depth of 2 feet, maybe 2.5 feet. So
The reason I'm asking is I need to keep them away from my suction box that goes
Yeah,
out into the
yeah.
pond. 12
yeah,
feet, 15 feet.
I'm pretty certain. So Jeff has done this type of work throughout the New England region. I'm sure it's not his first rodeo when it comes to farmers with their irrigation systems and cranberry growers and so forth. So I'm sure that if, we can identify where these.
Couple of flags or something.
Yeah, even if you put a bean pole out there with a flag or something, to mark it so that we make sure that it doesn't get bumped or damaged or, destroyed. And we could even do a pre-treatment survey where, if Jeff wants to go out there with a boat and mark those off, we can ask him if he'd be willing to do that.
There are a few large boulders about the size of a refrigerator
Yeah.
on my south property line that go right out, a long ways out towards the original river on the other side there. He might want to know where those are before he runs into them.
Again, I can discuss that with him, find out what his protocol is when it comes to underwater obstructions like large rocks. I know there's tree trunk, I know there's stumps in some of these ponds. I'm sure he's come into contact with these, like any New England pond, a lot of these ponds are man-made, they put an earthen dam at one end and these things just fill up. There used to be fields at one time, so I'm sure he's aware of these types of obstructions, but I can find out more information.
If it's a flat bottom barge, you might only be drawing like 6 inches.
It's the wheel.
Truthfully.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well,
And then
yeah.
the wheel
And
is taking
with the
lower.
hopper fills, you might have ballast and you might even get a little more.
I mean, we've had 500-ton barges, that only draw 12 inches, right? There's a reason why. It's all about the displacement. So if they get a flat bottom, they might do better than what we think, so.
And I don't know the specifics
Yeah,
of,
but we'll find out
of
when they get there.
yeah, these eco harvesters. But, we can get all this, again, let's just get the process
Get our
started,
toes in the water.
see the results. If the results are favorable, then we can go on to the next phase and, we can go from there.
All right, go ahead, Mark.
So, not to put the cart in front of the horse because you're talking about phase one but just a couple other thoughts or observations. I know that the time of year restriction that DMF put in the letter is related to river herring, alewife and bluebacks, and there's apparently eels up in there. But they spent tons of money to reestablish a good access for, the fish runs upstream. And I kind of bring that up as another potential pot of money that's directly tied, it's there in the lake. And I know, last I saw, the runs were still down a little bit compared to something like the Mattapoisett River, where they've got a pretty healthy run. And I'm just thinking it's connected right down into the harbor, and if you want to poke New Bedford, oh, did I say that? Oh. But I know that National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA, they've funded river herring restoration projects all over, and it seems like you got the first piece of it, but it's not done.
Yeah.
So you could pitch that. And so that's one idea. And then I had just one other that almost ties to the gentleman's comment about, and what we were talking about, how deep or how close to shore. Just to be aware that, and not that you would, but any, the shoreline, you want to leave it as undisturbed as possible because it's keeping the sedimentation out. And
Right.
you start disturbing stuff, you'll get a couple extra invasive species in there. You might, and I'm sure I'm telling you things that you've already thought about, Phragmites or purple loose strife,
Right.
which are real headaches in their own right. So
Yeah.
Phragmites is impossible to get rid of unless you hit it with salt water. It doesn't like salt water.
Right, and you touched on herring run. With the Hamlin Street Bridge, now I know that's partially a roadway project, and I know there were issues with the time of year that they could actually do work because of the herring. Were there any funds that were used relating to
It's a state project, so I don't know.
Yeah, that was all state?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
was
all
all
state.
state, yeah.
Because I figured since he touched on, looking into other resources for funding, since herring do run into Lake Street through,
Yeah.
up
Right.
through the Acushnet River and Hamlet Street and into Lake Street and beyond, if there was any funding or sources that were involved with Hamlin Street, maybe we could dip into that.
So here's the big thing, you already have the 75 grand available, correct?
We have some, I do not know the
degree
bottom.
of it.
Oh, okay.
I do not know exactly what's left after all the improvements have been done. I know we were approved for, I think it was $32,000 or $35,000 last year when we were gonna do the herbicide use.
So 6 days.
So I'm sure we've got a little bit more than that, but that's why I'm hoping we can get 6 days, maybe 7
Yeah.
days out of Jeff.
So, well, once you go do your first there, and then things are gonna tell us a lot,
Yeah.
right? And then we can say, then we're gonna have another year to really go after funding. So if everything goes good August, September, you're gonna go heavy after funding and get people, we can probably get other people to start looking and seeing what we can do together,
Yeah.
but we're all in for this project, I think, for the town, and I even believe the people out in the audience is all for this. So if we get to the first phase and get in there and see what things do and see what things happen, right now I think we got a lot of speculations, like what we're gonna do, what's gonna happen. We're not gonna know until we get the guy in there and say, okay, let's happen. And then we'll go from there. Chairman?
As far as the Hamlin Street project goes, the herring lift or fish ladder, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah, that was something.
was a cement structure that was put there probably in the 50s. And Fisheries and Wildlife came in, I want to say 15 years ago, and took the concrete structures out, naturalized the river. That was all Fisheries and Wildlife money. That came from fishing licenses, hunting licenses, paid for, and some tax money, I'm sure, but the highway, the bridge is Mass Highway. Mass Highway intended on coming in and ripping out that fishway and putting a new concrete one in, which totally defeated the purpose of taking the concrete one out. And when Mass Fisheries and Wildlife heard that that was going to happen, they jumped all over it because they wanted to keep it, as they put it, natural, which is, they're doing a lot of that around the state. They're
Right.
taking a lot of old
The
dams out
Yeah.
Yeah.
all over they've done 2 or 3 in Plymouth County.
I know, the sawmill was an ecological restoration project. They did a lot of improvements there with the fish ladder that's there and the wetlands, making it more biodiversible, if you will. Hopefully, I can get in touch, well, I know we wanted to keep the Buzzards Bay Coalition kind of at arm's length, but, maybe if I just kind of pick their brain a little bit, find out how they obtain funding for, a project like the mill pond, maybe we can, look at those avenues as well.
Yep, Cora at Fairhaven Acushnet Land Trust would be a good source of information with funding as well.
And maybe, so I believe there's some kind of a Cape Cod Commission for cranberry growers or something to that effect. Maybe we can get some assistance from them because these 2 gentlemen here draw their water from, I'm sure they have a permitted use to do so, so they draw their water from Lake Street and, maybe the Cape Cod Cranberry Collaborative.
Cranberry Growers Association.
Yeah. Maybe we could, look at them and see if they could give us some guidance. If they can't, if they're not able, or, if they don't normally give funding, maybe they can give us guidance, because I'm sure they themselves have probably run into a particular, project like this. So, once we get this first phase done, like Mr. Souza had mentioned, we can go full steam ahead and, look at all different avenues of trying to get funding so that, we don't have to keep taking money out of the preservation fund and fund it.
So, what do you think? I'd like to continue this
Yeah.
personally, just to get the comments back from the other state agencies, you know. Who knows? Yeah, that's pretty common practice. Do you think it'll be in 2 weeks, or do you want to continue this for a month?
So I'm not 100% sure how long it takes for Natural Heritage, to do their assessment and get back to us. I'm not sure how long it takes for DEP to do their assessment and get back to us. I would look at your guidance for that, because I don't know what their timelines are. I wouldn't even be.
Yeah, well,
Here's the other thing, why don't he get a hold of us? I mean, we're not dredging till next August, correct?
no, I know, but
Right.
we gotta keep the public hearing on, on the radar for.
Do we want
for-
to do 2 months?
No, I mean, we can do it, we can just keep it on the agenda.
Right.
But we'll continue it
Yeah.
until, I don't know, what do you say, the 9th? Was it October 9th? Was that our next
There's
one?
a
Yeah, I
couple
believe it was.
on there already. There's October 9th and 23rd, October 23rd.
You want to do October 23rd?
Yeah.
Continue it to October 23rd, we'll get an update.
6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get an update, make sure we hear back from all the other agencies. I know MISA and NEPA take some time.
Even if
Scott,
he's only
that
heard
sound
from
good
one
to
or
you?
two, he can let us know.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I mean,
That way it gives you plenty of time
not gonna
to
impede anything,
review
right?
any comments that come back, gives me time,
Yeah, we can,
to
excellent.
look into it. Now, Gary, do you have anything to add? Because
Um,
I've been long-winded. I mean, this is a passion of mine. I've been at this since 2017, but this gentleman here actually lives on the pond, so.
Hi, my name is Gary Coppa. Actually, I see several of you who live on the pond. I also live on the pond. I'm probably one of the new guys on the block. I've only been there about 23 years. So, that being said, from the time I moved in, I used to be able to fish right off my shore. That's impossible right now. You cannot even bring a boat to my shore right now because the weed level is actually out probably 80 feet. I think everyone here who lives on the pond knows that. That's what got me involved in this committee. That being said, it comes down to this: we need to do something, and this is the first logical step. Funding's an issue. We all know that. We're all taxpayers. We all know that. We want to do this as responsible as possible, but also as cheap as possible, without affecting our tax base. So that being said, that's what the committee's here for. We just want to get this ball rolling, and we're looking for everyone's help. If you have any ideas or funding levels, that's not what we're here for. We're here just to give you an option on how we can start cleaning the ponds. If this works, then the fun begins of trying to find how we're gonna pay for it. We have some money to get started, and that's where we're at. I'm not trying to push anything down anyone's throat. This is a responsible way of starting this project. And I think that's where we're at. So, thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that sounds good. You guys are all on board with that?
Yep.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to October 23rd.
Yep. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, we have an extension of an order of conditions. Mark Francois, 301 Perry Hill Road, SC file number 001-0567. A request for an extension of an order of conditions was filed for SC file number 001-0558. Mark Francois for property located at 301 Perry Hill Road, map 8, lots 25, 25B, 25E, 25F. The applicant proposes to improve approximately 628 feet of existing gravel roadway, to construct approximately 525 feet of new gravel roadway, and to construct stormwater swales and detention ponds, and to fill and grade within the 100-foot buffer zone of a vegetated wetland. Plan name is definitive subdivision, plan to be known as Perry Hill Estates, in Acushnet, Mass, dated August 11th, 2021. Stormwater operation and maintenance plan dated September 10th, 2021. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken. Mr. Francois, how you doing?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just here asking for a small extension, not much. Everything that you basically read off is complete. 99% of the project is complete. Some of you were out there last week and you saw it. Everything's complete, everything's working fine. The only thing that's not complete, and I didn't get a chance to finish last year, is a small replication area. And 90% of that is done. There's just some trees that were actually out of stock last year and I couldn't buy them. So I was gonna buy them and plant them this fall. But didn't wanna be working in an area that, I'm not supposed to be in. So I'm just here asking for, 6 months, a year, extension.
3 days.
And the only reason why I'm saying a year is because I think through the bylaw, you actually have to give it time to see if any invasive species take over a wetland. So I figure if it has 6 months or a year, I won't need that to finish the project. It's just to get an observation of the replication area to make sure nothing invasive takes over. But that's it.
Yep, we conducted a site visit Saturday. The site looks great. I've been out there multiple times for multiple inspections of roof drain systems on some of the houses. Been out there during rain events, after rain events, and everything seems to be functioning properly. The site looks really good. Everything's stabilized. Yeah, it looks really good.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yeah.
Do your extension. Give them plenty of time, this way if anything dies or whatever, you're not back here and, you know what I mean? It just gives you plenty of time to see what's happening, let Mother Nature do its course.
Yep.
You don't need the 3. The 1 probably will do it, but if it don't, then you're gonna be back here, right?
Yep, I think we'll do
I'll
it.
second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very
2
much.
years.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, discussion, 550 Main Street, final plan status review, matters presented, votes may be taken. Go ahead. This is from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to know where we stand with that. I think the last time Bill went out there with the Meridian plan from Navison for 550, does that need to be recorded? Do we need to get a new plan? What are we still looking for?
Okay, I will call Bill Madden on that. It's been a long time since we've discussed it.
Right.
Right.
I think the last time that I talked to him, he said he didn't think it needed an amendment because there was a minor grade improvements or whatever, but I don't want to put words in Bill's mouth, so I'll call Bill on that.
Yep, just so we can finalize that and everything looks good. A letter for the file or whatever.
Okay, I'll reach out to him for that. Yeah. We haven't heard any complaints. I haven't been out there. I haven't taken a ride out there.
We haven't had no rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Not substantial,
I haven't talked to Steve Campbell, but the last I did hear, it was significantly stabilized out there, so.
Yeah.
Like real grass was growing.
Yeah,
It wasn't.
we wanted to stop in.
On
We
the way
ended
back.
up, we ended up going the other way and we didn't get in there. We were gonna actually go in there and take a look, but we didn't make it on Saturday.
Oh, here,
Yeah, I didn't want to take a chance
Right.
of trying to get back through,
Getting stuck in the parade.
or any of that.
Okay. No violations this week. Agent updates, any agent updates, Mark?
I reached out to Jose Roman.
Yep.
And I had a list, put together a list, or was given a list, and then of regional engineering firms that would have a wetland scientist. I've shared that with Jose, Mr. Roman, and he said he was going to reach out. So I'm going to follow up with him. I'm probably on Friday. I'm going to be in all day Friday, so try to do a bunch of housekeeping.
I saw that email. I recommend all of those. I think, I want to say we compiled that list of engineers. That was for who we would use for like peer review or whatever, so, yeah. That.
Oh, so it's good. And I guess at least maybe some guidance from the commission, at least in my mind, and he asked this, it's like, do I need to delineate the entire, my property? And at least in my mind, it seems that, well, let's look at the affected area.
I think that's what we agreed on.
Yeah, I think that's,
Area.
yeah, that's what we voted on.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I'm
Yeah,
not
so
steering.
I would say
the wrong-
anything, the border, would it be east of his dwelling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We walk back in there a little bit.
Yeah. That's interesting. Suppose we should set up
We're trying to be as fair as
Determined.
possible.
I agree, yeah.
On this.
Yeah.
Made a
a,
mistake.
probably have a
So-
perimeter that, you know, it would encompass, you know?
Right,
You know what I'm saying? To
yeah, so.
get a good idea of the layout.
Right.
You know what I mean, as far as, I mean, it's not like, you know, we just wanted to do 10 or 20 feet of.
No, but like
Again.
linear, you know, north to south, the
Yeah.
whole property line, essentially, behind his dwelling.
And to find out where the wetlands
That's
are
right,
there.
that's what I mean.
Right.
Because I don't think he has any idea.
No.
I don't think he has any
No,
idea.
no.
And then I was just thinking one other thing about that. He has horses. What's he doing with his manure?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You can have the agent ask him about that, I don't.
Well,
Because
if he
I
is.
remember going to a couple of places, like one on Moss's Lane,
Yeah, if it does impact.
where the
well.
guy had a
It does,
sealed
yeah.
roll-off. He only had one horse.
Well,
And that's
to
how
put
he
his-
contained
Where he's
it?
Putting it.
Yeah, he contained it in
manure
a,
and
yeah.
it went into
and
the
contained
sealed-
a
Into a
sealed
sealed
roll-off.
lined roll-off. And take it off site when it
Yeah,
was full.
no, I get it, yeah, if it's gonna impact the,
That would impact the wetlands.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then we went to that farm.
right,
There.
Costas, right?
Yeah, right.
Right,
Costas, yeah.
yeah, Chipaway. We went
Chipaway,
there, they
yeah.
were
Oh,
looking-
chip away, yeah.
Yep,
That was another manure storage issue.
Right.
Well, the worst part
they
about.
were looking to build.
Right,
Right.
but I mean, that's,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, the worst part about horse manure too is that the seed goes out. So if that gets into the water, you're gonna start planting everything that the horse ate along the edges.
Actually,
Right.
That's why you don't use horse manure in the garden.
he gets his,
All right.
you know.
just, that was
The
just.
guy has-
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
no,
that's a
that's-
good
that's-
observation,
Yeah.
it really
Something to
is.
reach it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What does he
Mark,
have?
if you could- if you-
To the commission.
if you could ask that gentleman about what he's doing with the manure, that's a good
At
question.
least, right? Yeah.
I had one site that I went out and visited. I'm gonna try to, you know, so for updates, I'm trying to get back out to sites. If I've been out there, to show back up again. You know, it's one that, you know, they didn't have the siltation barrier in place, and I'm like, you gotta get that in place. I don't think the work was being done yet, but just, so those are types of things, other things I'm trying to do.
Excellent.
Just remember, Mike, you got a couple guys here that don't work, and
Oh, yeah.
if you ever need someone to go for a ride with you or whatever, you want us to look at it with you, please give us a call.
Yeah, and
You know?
I appreciate folks stopping in.
Yep.
It's, yeah.
Whatever we can do as a team, that's what it helps, right? We all work together.
Thanks, guys. Other business, any other business? I don't have anything. Future business, next meeting of the Conservation Commission will be on September 25th, 2024. Meeting to be held at the Town Hall Meeting Room located at 122 Main Street, Acushnet, Mass. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
To adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.